The World Cup didn't change over weeks. It changed overnight. Just hours earlier, one of football's biggest nations still believed it had a path to the knockout stage. Then the final whistle blew. Uruguay's players dropped to the turf, their World Cup over before anyone expected. Thousands of kilometers away, Cape Verde celebrated a moment that would become the biggest achievement in their football history. At almost the same time, England, Egypt, and Senegal quietly secured their places, while Ousmane Dembélé delivered a hat-trick that reminded everyone why this tournament refuses to follow the script. Most fans watched the goals. Most fans checked the scores. But almost nobody noticed what was really happening. Because this wasn't just another match day. It was the day the entire World Cup bracket was rewritten. Favorites suddenly found themselves on a completely different road to the final. Underdogs stopped dreaming and started believing. And by the time the celebrations were over, this tournament had become something nobody predicted just 24 hours earlier. So what exactly happened? How did a single day completely reshape the biggest tournament in football? That's the story we're uncovering today. And if you enjoy football documentaries that go beyond the headlines to reveal the moments everyone else missed, make sure to subscribe. Because some of football's biggest stories aren't the ones making the front page. They're the ones hidden between the final whistles. Let's begin. The clock ticked into the final minutes, and every touch suddenly carried the weight of an entire nation. Uruguay had arrived at this World Cup expecting another deep run. They had experienced players, a proud history, and every reason to believe they would still be playing when the knockout rounds began. But as the seconds disappeared, so did that belief. When the referee blew the final whistle, everything stopped. Uruguayan players stood frozen. Some dropped to the grass with their hands over their faces. Others stared at the giant stadium screen, hoping they had misunderstood the numbers. Their supporters, who had spent 90 minutes singing without pause, fell into complete silence. There would be no comeback. No second chance. One of football's most respected World Cup nations had been eliminated. But while cameras focused on the heartbreak, another celebration was unfolding almost unnoticed. Thousands of miles away, Cape Verde's players embraced one another as if they had already won a final. Staff members sprinted onto the pitch. The substitutes emptied the bench. For a country making history on football's biggest stage, qualification felt almost impossible just a few weeks earlier. Yet the story didn't end with one team's celebration and another team's tears. Uruguay's exit created a chain reaction that most viewers never noticed. The knockout bracket instantly shifted. Teams that had been preparing for one opponent suddenly faced another. Coaches began redrawing their plans before the group stage had even finished. One result hadn't just eliminated a former champion. It had quietly changed the path of the entire tournament. And that was only the beginning. Before the tournament began, almost nobody was talking about Cape Verde. The conversation was always about the favorites. Spain. Uruguay. The traditional giants expected to control the group. Cape Verde were seen as the team that might compete, but not the team that would survive. The players heard those predictions. Then they started proving them wrong. Every point they earned increased the pressure on everyone else. Every disciplined performance forced bigger nations to take them seriously. What looked like a surprise in the opening match slowly became a pattern that couldn't be ignored. By the final group game, the pressure had completely shifted. Uruguay needed the result. Cape Verde needed just one more disciplined performance to complete what many believed was impossible. When qualification was finally confirmed, the celebrations told the whole story. Players embraced one another before collapsing onto the pitch in disbelief. Coaches punched the air. The traveling supporters, outnumbered in the stands, made enough noise to sound like they owned the stadium. It wasn't just another team reaching the knockout stage. It was the first time Cape Verde had reached this point at a FIFA World Cup, rewriting the biggest chapter in the nation's football history. But the biggest surprise wasn't simply that Cape Verde had qualified. It was who they would force everyone else to face. Within minutes, fans across the world stopped celebrating goals and started refreshing the knockout bracket. Analysts began drawing new predictions. Teams that thought they knew their route to the final suddenly found themselves preparing for completely different opponents. The World Cup hadn't just produced an underdog. It had produced a domino effect. And as more qualification places were confirmed over the next 24 hours, the tournament changed even more dramatically. While millions of fans were celebrating goals and sharing highlight clips, coaches were watching something completely different. The bracket. As the final group stage matches came to an end, qualification was confirmed one team after another. England were through. Egypt had secured their place. Senegal booked their ticket to the knockout stage. Belgium survived. Within a matter of hours, the round of 32 was no longer a prediction. It was a reality. And that reality looked nothing like anyone expected. Every result triggered another reaction. One team's qualification changed another team's opponent. A victory on one side of the tournament completely reshaped the route on the other. Coaches who had spent days studying one potential rival suddenly had to prepare for someone else. Training sessions were rewritten. Video analysts started collecting new footage before the celebrations had even ended. For the players, there was barely any time to enjoy the moment. 1 minute they were celebrating in front of their supporters. The next they were asking the same question everyone else was. Who do we play now? Then came the fixtures. Brazil would face Japan. Argentina were matched with a fearless Cape Verde side. England's reward was DR Congo. Belgium would meet an informed Senegal team. On paper, some matches looked straightforward. But after everything the group stage had already produced, nobody was willing to call anything predictable anymore. The group stage wasn't just over. It had quietly set the stage for an entirely different tournament. And just when fans thought the biggest surprises were behind them, the spotlight shifted away from the standings and onto the players who were creating moments no one would forget. As the headlines focused on who had qualified and who had gone home, another story was unfolding. One that couldn't be measured by the standings alone. In Inglewood, the United States were already in control when Sebastian Berhalter found space near the edge of the box. He struck the ball cleanly, and seconds later it was in the back of the net. He sprinted toward the corner flag, arms outstretched, while his teammates chased him across the pitch. But the most emotional reaction wasn't on the field. Watching from the stands was his father, Greg Berhalter. The former United States coach had once lived this tournament as a player and later as the man responsible for leading the national team. Now he was simply a father watching his son score his first ever World Cup goal. Pride replaced pressure. Years of criticism, expectations, and sacrifice disappeared in a single moment. Just a day later, another unforgettable performance stole the spotlight. France's Ousmane Dembélé delivered a hat-trick, tearing through Norway's defense with confidence and precision. The crowd rose to its feet with every goal, yet after the match he refused to celebrate himself. Instead, he delivered a message that caught everyone's attention. It was incredible, but I know I can play better. That mindset summed up the mood of the tournament. Nobody believed the job was finished. Not the rising stars. Not the favorites. Not even the teams that had already exceeded every expectation. Because with the knockout stage finally set, individual moments would no longer be enough. From this point forward, every goal, every mistake, and every decision could end a nation's World Cup in 90 minutes. The celebrations didn't last long. Inside dressing rooms across North America, the music slowly faded. Medals weren't being handed out. No trophies had been won. The group stage was over, but everyone knew the real tournament was only beginning. The first signs of that pressure came from Belgium. Despite finishing the job and reaching the knockout stage, there was no talk of becoming champions. Goalkeeper Thibaut Courtois faced the media with a message that surprised many. We're still far from contenders. It wasn't frustration. It was a warning. Belgium understood that surviving the group stage meant nothing if they couldn't survive what came next. The same tension could be seen everywhere. England walked into the knockout rounds carrying the expectations of millions. Senegal had transformed from an underdog into a team nobody wanted to face. Egypt had earned belief through discipline and resilience, while Cape Verde suddenly found themselves representing every nation dreaming of another upset. The pressure had changed. During the group stage, teams could recover from one mistake. Now there was no safety net. One missed penalty. One defensive error. One moment of hesitation. 90 minutes could erase years of preparation. As coaches held late-night tactical meetings and players studied their next opponents, one thing became impossible to ignore. This wasn't the same World Cup that had started just days earlier. The favorites had changed. The bracket had changed. The confidence of entire nations had changed. And when people looked back on this tournament, they wouldn't remember one single goal or one isolated upset. They would remember the day everything changed overnight. When people look back on a World Cup, they usually remember the champions, the winning goal, the dramatic penalty shootout, the iconic celebration. But those moments don't always tell the whole story. Sometimes the biggest turning point happens long before the final. It happens on a single match day when dozens of separate moments quietly come together. Uruguay's elimination wasn't just another upset. It opened the door for a completely different knockout picture. Cape Verde's historic qualification wasn't simply a feel-good story. It forced some of the tournament's biggest nations onto unexpected paths. England, Egypt, Belgium, and Senegal didn't just celebrate reaching the next round. They stepped into a bracket that looked completely different from the one they had imagined only a day earlier. At the same time, individual moments added even more emotion to the tournament. Sebastian Berhalter gave the United States a memory his family will never forget. Ousmane Dembélé reminded the world why football's biggest stars can still shine when the pressure is highest. Around them, players celebrated, supporters dreamed, and entire nations began believing that this World Cup could be theirs. That's what almost everyone missed. The story wasn't one goal. It wasn't one team. It wasn't even one upset. It was how all of those moments collided within a few extraordinary hours to transform the tournament completely. The World Cup didn't slowly evolve. It changed overnight. And from that moment on, every team left standing knew one thing. The road to lifting football's greatest trophy would never be the one they expected. So, was this the real turning point of the 2026 World Cup? Which moment do you think changed the tournament the most? And which team has the best chance to shock the world next? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoy football documentaries that uncover the story behind the story, subscribe for more. Because sometimes, the biggest moments in football are the ones almost everyone misses.